Evan Carter was not the kind of human who expected to do anything heroic. He was an engineer, one who repaired machines and fixed problems that no one else wanted to touch. He had never imagined that he would stand in the great crystalline palace of the Tiriana Empire, looking at a being so different and so powerful that most humans would have trembled in fear. But here he was, carrying a small toolkit, trying to make a broken translator work so that he could speak with the alien leaders. The Tiriana Empire was famous, or rather infamous, across several star systems. Its people were tall and elegant, with skin that shimmered like liquid silver. Their eyes were like molten gold, and their movements were precise, almost like they were performing a dance with every step. Humans who visited the empire were told to obey rules strictly, speak with care, and never show emotions. To the Tiriana, emotions were weaknesses. To Evan, they were simply normal. He had been working on the translator for over an hour, trying to align tiny circuits and correct the device so it could accurately translate between human speech and Tiriana language. The palace around him was enormous. Towers of clear crystal rose from the floor like frozen waterfalls, and lights floated in midair, casting gentle rainbows across the walls. The palace had no obvious doors. Everything moved with energy, as if the building itself was alive. Evan was so focused on the device that he did not notice the soft footsteps approaching behind him. When he finally looked up, the figure standing before him took his breath away. She was taller than any human he had ever seen, her body elegant and radiant. Her skin shone like silver under the palace lights, and her eyes were wide, golden, and intelligent. She wore a flowing robe that shimmered with patterns that seemed to move as she moved. The alien queen had arrived. The room went quiet. The guards, who had been standing silently near the walls, stiffened and raised their spears. The queen's presence alone made the air feel heavy. Evan felt his heart race, but he did not move. He was not supposed to speak until spoken to, yet his mouth moved on its own, repeating words he had not intended to say. "You're beautiful," he said. The words echoed in the hall. Silence followed. The translators were still half working, and his voice carried in both human and Tiriana tones, a strange combination that made the words even more noticeable. He immediately realized his mistake. No human was supposed to speak to the queen like that. The queen blinked. That was unusual. Tiriana rarely showed emotion in public, and yet she had clearly noticed him. She stepped closer, tilting her head as if studying him. "Did you just speak to me as a human speaks to another?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, melodic, and strange, like music made from air and water. Evan swallowed hard. I didn't mean to be rude," he said. "I was just honest. I wasn't trying to impress anyone." The queen's eyes seemed to study him deeper than any human could. "Honesty?" she said. "Humans value honesty above safety? You do not fear the consequences of your words?" Evan shook his head. "I didn't think. I just said what I felt. That's all." A ripple of movement went through the palace. The guards relaxed slightly, unsure if they should attack or stand down. The queen took another step closer. "You are unusual," she said, almost to herself. "Perhaps there is more in humans than I believed." No one spoke. Evan felt every eye on him. His human companions, a small diplomatic team, looked terrified. They whispered to each other, afraid of what would happen next. Most humans never survived a mistake like this. But then, the queen did something no one expected. She smiled, faintly, the first sign of emotion she had shown. "Stay," she said. "I wish to ask you questions. You may answer honestly, without fear. Do you understand?" Evan nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty." His heart was pounding so fast it felt like it would burst. He had never spoken to anyone like this before, let alone an alien queen whose reputation alone could frighten entire fleets. For hours, she asked him questions. She wanted to know about humans, their fears, their courage, and their way of thinking. She asked why humans took risks, why they often acted before thinking, and why they trusted strangers more easily than her people. Evan answered as best he could. He spoke about emotions, friendship, loyalty, and even love. He told her how humans made mistakes, but also learned from them. The queen listened quietly. She asked questions not to test him, but to understand. At one point, she asked, "Would a human die for another, even if there was no reward?" "Yes," Evan said. "Many humans would. That is how we survive. That is how we protect what matters." The queen remained silent for a long moment. Then she leaned back, tilting her head in thought. "You have courage," she said finally. "I see it in your eyes. You are not like the others." Evan did not know what to say. Most humans would have panicked, stumbled over their words, or tried to explain themselves. But something about the queen's presence made him speak honestly, as he always did. "I don't know if I'm brave," he admitted. "I just try to do what is right, even if it scares me." She studied him again. "This is rare. Humans are too cautious, too careful. You speak freely. You feel freely. That may be useful." Evan's mind raced. He did not understand what she meant by useful. He had never been in a position of power with anyone, let alone a species that ruled hundreds of worlds. Yet, somehow, the queen seemed to consider him important. By the time he left the palace that evening, he was exhausted. His hands shook, and he felt as though he had run a marathon. Yet, a strange feeling had settled in his chest. A mix of fear, excitement, and curiosity. Rumors had already started among the palace guards. The human had intrigued the queen. Back in his quarters, Evan tried to calm down. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. He had never expected to be noticed by anyone so powerful, let alone to have survived saying something foolish. But somewhere deep inside, he felt a spark. Something was changing. The next morning, he was summoned again. This time, he was not asked to fix a machine or deliver a report. Alindra, the queen, wanted him to observe her army. She wanted him to watch how they trained, how they moved, how they fought. She said nothing more. But Evan understood she wanted his opinion, his human perspective, something that no Tiriana general could provide. As he watched the soldiers move with precision, Evan noticed something humans often missed. They were strong, fast, and disciplined. Yet they lacked the spark that humans called intuition. They followed orders perfectly but rarely acted outside them. Evan understood the danger. The enemy could exploit this. But the queen, he realized, might see him as a bridge, someone who could teach her soldiers to think beyond rules, to act with heart as well as skill. Over the next several days, he trained with the soldiers. They were wary of him at first. He was a human, small and fragile compared to their strength. Yet he learned quickly, adapting their movements, offering small suggestions that sometimes worked better than their standard tactics. Some of the soldiers began to respect him, curious about his boldness, and even his mistakes. The queen watched him often. He could feel her gaze, even when she was across the palace. Sometimes, she would ask him to explain why he made certain decisions, or why humans behaved the way they did. Evan realized she was testing him, not with weapons, but with questions, to see if he truly understood courage, loyalty, and honesty. One evening, while they were walking through the palace gardens, Alindra asked him a question that made his heart skip. "Do humans always speak honestly?" she asked. "Not always," Evan replied. "Sometimes we lie to protect ourselves or others, but we always speak honestly when it truly matters." She paused, looking at the floating lights above. "You spoke honestly the first day we met. That is why you are still here." Evan wanted to protest, to say he had only spoken without thinking. But the truth was, he felt proud. For once, honesty had brought him here, had allowed him to survive. It was a strange feeling for someone used to hiding behind machines and tools. The palace was quiet that night. Evan could hear the soft hum of the lights and the gentle rustling of the gardens. He thought about the stars outside, the humans he had left behind, and the dangerous path ahead. He did not know what the Queen wanted from him, or how this strange connection between them would develop, but he felt a new sense of purpose, one he had never known before. And for the first time, Evan Carter realized that speaking the truth, no matter how foolish it seemed, could change everything. Evan Carter woke early the next morning, his mind still buzzing from the events of the previous days. The palace was quieter than usual, and the sunlight reflected off the crystal towers, creating patterns of light that danced across the floors. He had expected to be given small tasks again, perhaps fixing more devices or observing soldiers. What he did not expect was the message waiting for him at his quarters. The Queen wished to see him immediately. When he arrived, Elindra was standing in the central hall. The crystal floors reflected her shimmering form. She did not smile this time. Her expression was serious, calm, but carried the weight of command. Around her, generals and guards stood at attention, their golden eyes fixed on the human who had dared to speak honestly in her presence. "Evan Carter," she said, her voice echoing softly across the hall. "You have observed my soldiers and shared your human perspective. You have proven that your honesty and your courage are unlike most humans I have encountered. Today, I make an unusual offer." Evan's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea what she meant. His hands tightened at his sides. "I wish to make you the leader of a segment of my army," she said. "You will command soldiers who will answer only to you. Your perspective, your creativity, your understanding of courage, it is what this army needs. Will you accept?" Evan's mouth went dry. His mind raced with fear and disbelief. Humans did not lead alien armies, especially not armies as disciplined and deadly as the Tiriana. I don't know if I can," he said honestly. "I am just an engineer. I fix machines. I do not know how to lead soldiers." The Queen studied him, tilting her head slightly. "That is why you are perfect. You are not bound by the rigid thinking of my generals. You see possibilities they do not see. You will bring the unexpected. That is what this army needs if we are to defeat the rebels threatening my empire." The generals muttered among themselves. Some shook their heads. Others looked doubtful. One older general, named Kale, stepped forward. "Your Majesty, a human cannot command trained Tiriana soldiers. It will fail. It is dangerous. We risk the lives of many if we follow a human's advice." Elindra's golden eyes flashed. "Silence. He will lead. You will follow his command. If you cannot, leave my presence." Evan swallowed hard. He wanted to run, to hide, to tell her she must have made a mistake, but something in her tone told him this was serious. He nodded slowly. I will do my best," he said. That night, he began his first lessons in leadership. Elindra assigned him a small team to start with. Soldiers who would not question his commands at first. They were wary, watching the human as if he might fail at any moment. Their discipline was perfect, their movements precise, but they lacked flexibility. They followed rules exactly, and never made decisions on their own. Evan spent hours observing them. He noticed patterns in their training, the way they moved their bodies, the timing of their attacks. He realized that while they were strong and fast, they were predictable. He tried small changes in their exercises, suggesting different ways to defend or attack. Some soldiers resisted, but a few followed his ideas. Slowly, he began to see small improvements. One soldier, Lyra, approached him cautiously. "Human," she said, "you are not like the others. Your ideas, they are strange, but effective. Why do you think differently?" Evan smiled faintly. "I guess I just do not always follow the rules. Sometimes the best solution is not the one that is expected." Lyra nodded. "I will follow your orders, human. Show me what I should do." Over the next few days, Evan's team grew. More soldiers started to follow him, curious about his methods. He worked closely with a human officer named Megan Brooks, who helped him communicate strategies to the soldiers. She explained cultural differences, helped him adjust commands so the Tiriana could understand, and encouraged him when he doubted himself. Then came the first test. Reports arrived that a rebel group, the Void Crest, had attacked a small outpost near the edge of the Empire. The Queen wanted him to plan the defense. Evan studied the reports and maps carefully. He noticed that the outpost was surrounded by uneven terrain, full of narrow passages and hidden cliffs. Most Tiriana generals would have attacked directly, relying on their strength and weapons. Evan thought differently. He suggested using the terrain to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes, forcing the enemy into confined spaces where their numbers would not matter. Some generals scoffed. "The human underestimates the enemy," one said. "This will fail." Elendra remained silent, but focused on Evan. "Proceed as you see fit," she said. The battle began the next morning. Evan directed his forces from a high vantage point, using signals and simple commands to move his soldiers. The Voidcrest forces advanced, confident they would overwhelm the defenders. Then the traps activated. Narrow passages blocked their movement, ambushes struck from unexpected directions, and the soldiers began to work in ways the enemy did not anticipate. Evan watched as the battle unfolded. His heart pounded with fear and excitement. He could see soldiers falling, both Tiriana and enemy. But he also saw success. The strategies he had designed were working. The enemy was confused, forced to retreat, and the outpost was saved. When the battle ended, the Queen arrived at the site. She walked through the outpost, observing the human soldiers who had followed Evan's plan. "You did well," she said, speaking to him directly. "You are not only honest, but capable. The Empire may have found a new path through your courage and thinking." Evan felt a mix of pride and disbelief. He had never imagined that simply speaking honestly and observing carefully could lead to this. Soldiers who had once doubted him now respected him. Some even smiled when they saw him, a small sign of trust and camaraderie. As the days passed, Evan's role expanded. Elendra asked him to oversee training for larger units, to develop new strategies for future conflicts. He worked tirelessly, often staying up late into the night, drawing maps, adjusting plans, and teaching soldiers to think for themselves. His methods were strange to them at first, but gradually, the army began to adapt. Soldiers became more flexible, more daring, and more creative in their tactics. Elendra watched him closely, sometimes joining the training sessions herself. She asked questions about human bravery, about why people risked everything for others, and why humans sometimes acted against logic. Evan explained, as best as he could, that humans valued trust, loyalty, and courage above rules. She listened quietly, sometimes nodding, sometimes smiling faintly. One evening, after a long day of drills, she approached him alone. "You have changed my army," she said softly. "They are stronger because of you, not because of their strength, but because they have learned to think and feel. That is something my generals could not teach." Evan felt warmth in his chest. "I just tried to help," he said. "I never thought I could do this." She studied him for a long moment. "You are not like other humans," she said. "You have something rare courage that is honest, and thinking that is free. That is why I chose you." The next weeks were filled with constant training and preparation. The Voidcrest was still a threat, and the Queen wanted to be ready. Evan continued to learn, not just about leadership but about the Tiriana themselves. He discovered that their discipline, while strict, hid deep fears and insecurities. They had rarely been allowed to act on instinct, to make mistakes, or to feel deeply. Evan's presence gave them permission to do so, to try, fail, and try again. One day, a skirmish broke out near a border city. The Voidcrest had sent a small fleet to test defenses. Evan's unit was called in. He directed them carefully, combining Tiriana precision with human unpredictability. His strategies worked again, and the enemy was forced to retreat. Soldiers cheered quietly, knowing they had survived because of the human who had once said a simple truth to the Queen. After the battle, Alindra approached him again. "You see, human," she said, "your honesty, your courage, your way of thinking, it has value beyond what my people understand. You are not just a leader in battle. You are a symbol, a spark that may change this empire forever." Evan shook his head, overwhelmed. "I am just a human," he said. "I do not know if I am worthy of such words." The queen smiled faintly. "You are already worthy. You will learn more. And soon, you will be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine." Evan looked out over the palace gardens, the soldiers training below, and the sparkling towers of the Tiriana Empire. He felt a strange mix of fear, excitement, and responsibility. For the first time, he understood that being honest, being brave, and being human could have power. Real power. And he knew, deep inside, that his journey with the alien queen, the army, and the future of the empire was only just beginning. The Void Crest had grown bold. Reports arrived at the palace every hour, warning that the rebel forces were gathering a massive fleet near the outer borders of the Tiriana Empire. The queen called a council of war. And this time, Evan Carter was not just a participant, he was at the center of it. The council room was enormous, with walls of glowing crystal and floating lights that bathed the space in soft colors. Alindra sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding every eye. The generals and officers of the Tiriana Empire looked uneasy, their golden eyes flicking toward the human who had once spoken a simple truth and now led part of their army. Evan studied the maps laid out before him. The Void Crest fleet was larger than any of the previous skirmishes. Their ships were fast and heavily armed, capable of destroying outposts in minutes. The Queen's army was strong, disciplined, and well-equipped. But it was also predictable. Evan knew that conventional strategies would fail against such an enemy. He took a deep breath and spoke. "We cannot fight them head-on. Their numbers and speed will overwhelm us. We need to force them into a place where we can control the battle, where our soldiers' discipline and your strategies can work together." The generals exchanged uneasy glances. One of them, Kael, spoke first. "And where exactly do you suggest this? A human has no experience with fleet-level tactics. This could be disastrous." Evan held his ground. "There is a system nearby with asteroid fields. We can lure their ships into the narrow passages. Their speed will work against them. If we position our fleet carefully and set ambushes, we can break their formation and force them into chaos." Alindra studied him for a long moment. "Your plan is risky," she said, "but it shows creativity. That is something our enemies cannot predict. I approve. You will lead this operation." The preparations began immediately. Evan worked with the Tiriana fleet commanders and human officers like Megan Brooks to coordinate positions, signals, and timing. Every day, soldiers drilled, fleets maneuvered, and traps were prepared. Evan spent long hours on strategy, learning quickly about alien technology, weapons, and combat styles. He adapted, combined human thinking with Tiriana discipline, and found solutions that no one else could see. As the day of the battle approached, Evan felt the weight of responsibility. The Queen had trusted him with more than strategy, she had trusted him with lives. He walked through the training grounds, watching soldiers practice maneuvers. Some were nervous, others confident, but all respected him now. He had earned their trust through courage, honesty, and careful planning. Finally, the Void Crest fleet arrived. The outer scanners detected hundreds of ships moving swiftly through space, their engines glowing red like embers. The Tiriana fleet waited in formation. Hidden within asteroid shadows, Evan gave the signal. The fleet moved with silent precision, luring the rebels toward the trap. The first clash was sudden and brutal. Enemy ships tried to break the formation, but Evan's ambush worked. Narrow passages forced the rebels into confined spaces. Tiriana ships struck from unexpected angles. Explosions lit the darkness of space, and alarms blared across every ship. Evan directed the battle from the command deck. He gave clear instructions, adjusted strategies as the enemy adapted, and remained calm under pressure. Every decision mattered. Every mistake could cost lives. And yet, he felt a strange focus, a clarity he had never known before. During the battle, a Voidcrest flagship broke formation and headed straight for the palace. Its weapons could destroy the crystal towers in minutes. The Queen herself prepared to command a counterattack, but Evan shouted through the communication system, "Wait, let me handle this." Elindra hesitated, her golden eyes meeting his. Then she nodded. "Do as you see fit, human." Evan organized a small strike team, combining Tiriana warriors with human volunteers. They boarded the enemy flagship, moving quickly through corridors filled with armed soldiers. The humans relied on their intuition, the Tiriana on strength and precision. Evan led the charge, using both strategy and courage to navigate the enemy ship. Inside the flagship, the fighting was intense. Soldiers fell on both sides. Evan's heart pounded, but he pushed forward, thinking clearly, guiding his team, and finding the ship's core. Finally, he reached the control room. With careful work, he disabled the engines and weapons, stopping the flagship from reaching the palace. When they returned to their ships, the Voidcrest fleet was in chaos. Their formation broken, their morale low. They began to retreat. The Tiriana fleet pressed the advantage, forcing the rebels to flee beyond the borders of the Empire. The battle was over. Elindra arrived at the battlefield soon after. She walked through the ranks of her soldiers, observing the human who had led them to victory. Her expression was calm, but there was pride in her eyes. She approached Evan. "You have done what I believed impossible," she said. "You led my army, and you saved my empire. Your courage, your honesty, your thinking, these are more valuable than strength alone." Evan felt a wave of relief and pride. Soldiers gathered around him, some touching his shoulder, others bowing slightly in respect. He had earned their loyalty, not by blood or birthright, but through action and honesty. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Elindra and Evan walked alone. The stars reflected in the crystal towers, sparkling like distant fires. She looked at him and spoke softly. "You are no longer just a human in my empire. You are a leader, a symbol. My people will follow you, not because they must, but because they trust you." Evan shook his head, feeling both amazed and overwhelmed. "I am just a human," he said. "I never imagined I could do something like this. I only spoke honestly to you once. And now, this." Elindra smiled faintly. "That honesty was a spark. It showed me something humans have that my people rarely do: courage without calculation. That is why I chose you. That is why I trusted you." Evan looked out over the city, the soldiers training in the distance, and the calm space beyond the palace walls. He realized that everything had changed. He had gone from a simple engineer to a commander of an alien army, trusted by a queen, and respected by soldiers who had once doubted him. The days after the battle were filled with recovery and planning. Evan worked tirelessly, helping to rebuild damaged outposts, training soldiers, and preparing for any future threats. The Queen often joined him, asking questions about human strategy and behavior. They spent long hours discussing courage, loyalty, and leadership. Evan began to understand the Queen not just as a ruler, but as a being who carried centuries of responsibility and isolation. One evening, Elindra turned to him quietly. "Did you call me beautiful because you were afraid, or because you meant it?" she asked. Evan looked at her, his heart steady. "I meant it," he said. "I spoke honestly, and I still believe it. You are beautiful, not just in appearance, but in strength and courage." For the first time, Elindra smiled fully. Her expression was radiant, rare for a queen who had ruled without showing personal emotion for centuries. "Then you have given me a gift beyond words," she said softly. From that moment, Evan understood something profound. The Queen did not just trust him. She respected him, valued him, and, in her own way, cared for him. He was no longer just a human, in an alien empire. He was a bridge between worlds, a symbol of courage and honesty, and a leader who had proven that humans, though fragile, could inspire greatness. As the stars shimmered above the palace, Evan knew that the journey was not over. The Empire would face challenges, enemies, and uncertainty. But for the first time, he felt ready. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act honestly despite it. And with that courage, he would lead the Tiriana army into a future where humans and aliens could stand together. Stronger than either could alone. Evan Carter, the human who had once spoken without thought, now stood as a leader, a hero, and a symbol of what humanity could achieve. And as he looked at Alendra, the queen who had chosen him, he realized that sometimes the smallest acts of honesty could change the course of history, and even the fate of an entire empire.